It is 7 o'clock and I am calling this meeting to order. I would appreciate it if everybody would rise and join me in the pledge, and at the end, please remain standing for a moment of silence in memory of Teresa Davidson, sixth grade teacher at Boulder Creek Elementary. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. May we have roll call, please?
Mrs. Matura is absent this evening. Mrs. Greenberg?
Here.
Mrs. Bacon?
Here.
Mrs. Brown?
Here.
Mrs. Case?
Here.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is approval of agenda. Dr. Bales.
Thank you, President Greenberg. Items approved by consent will not come up for discussion during the meeting, but will be approved when the agenda is adopted. This is possible since members of the governing board receive the agenda along with backup materials at least 24 hours prior to the meeting and have time to review and consider all items. Prior to the agenda being adopted, members of the governing board or audience may ask that an item be removed from the consent agenda and brought to the floor for discussion at the appropriate place on the agenda. I would like to offer the agenda as posted.
Thank you, Dr. Bales. Does any member of the board wish to remove anything from the consent agenda? Does any member of the audience? Seeing none, Mrs. Brown, may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next is, excuse me, is governing board statements. Does anybody have anything they would like to? Mrs. Case, do you have a statement? Governing board statement? Okay. Next on the agenda is awards, excuse me, awards and recognitions. Dr. Holmes.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, cabinet, and guests. Our first recognition is the recipient of the Paradise Valley Education Association's Recognition of Professional Standards Award for Teachers. The honoree will be introduced by Ms. Susie Seep, PVEA President.
Thank you, President Greenberg, Dr. Bales, Governing Board, and Cabinet. It is with great pride that I introduce to you this month's props recipient, Kelsey Moore, kindergarten teacher at Mercury Mine. Her colleague, the also amazing Catherine Goshert, wrote that I feel my colleague Kelsey Moore deserves props for many reasons. Kelsey is a former PVUSD student as well as a talented PVUSD educator. She assures our littlest learners get the best instruction possible. It is not easy to differentiate in the primary grades in the best of times, and nearly impossible to do during a pandemic. Kelsey strives to do so daily and succeeds in taking every student as far as they can go, even in adverse conditions. Last year, Kelsey looped with her students from kindergarten to first grade, and her students were very lucky to have this opportunity. Kelsey was one of the rare teachers who was comfortable and successful teaching both remotely and in dual modality. She was able to create and maintain a strong classroom family even while teaching virtually. She often drove to students' homes to drop off supplies, check in, or read them a special story. Each of her students was successful and showed growth during this challenging time. I've taught alongside Kelsey for 8 years and know that even during a regular year, she goes above and beyond for her students and their families. It is her priority to make sure her students have what they need to succeed. She does so while communicating daily with her families about the children. Kelsey is also a mentor teacher at our site. She helps support our new teachers or those new to the site by providing information and support. She is respected and integral member of our school family, and as we say in kindergarten, is a good friend to others. She is able to do all of this while parenting 2 daughters, one currently in pre-K at Mercury Mine, and the other who attended Mercury Mine and is now at Shea. All of these reasons and more are why I'm proud to work with Kelsey and feel that she truly deserves props. I am so proud to be associated with educators like Kelsey and her teammate Kathy. I believe they exemplify what it means to be a professional, recognizing other professionals' success. And actually, I spent 2 minutes in the classroom and totally disrupted kindergarten. I cannot even begin to tell you what a challenge a kindergarten classroom is. I am afraid to ever go back into another one. She got them right back in line, but I never would have been able to. Thank you, Kelsey. She's here tonight, as is her principal and colleague.
Next is the Paradise Valley Education Support Professional of the Month. PVSEA President, Ms. Michelle Courtwright, will make the presentation.
President Greenberg, Governing Board, Dr. Bales, and Cabinet. It is with great pleasure that I present the award to Susan Transon. She is an administrative assistant in the SPED department. And as many of us know, administrative assistants are key to how this district works. They are the right hand of our administrators. They kind of keep everything going. They field many phone calls. And in the SPED department, they get a lot of phone calls from parents. And by the time a parent has made the call to our special ed department, they have exhausted everything else. So many times they are a little bit frazzled and a little bit frustrated. And I was delighted to read that her administrator said, "Every day I get compliments on how above and beyond Susan goes when finding out information for parents and staff. She is the voice of reason when parents are upset and need to vent. She is fabulous at getting parents to remain calm, and she always tells them she's going to help them and not to worry. She follows through. She tells the parents that they are part of the solution. She works hard to get the parents to realize that we are here to help them. When parents are frustrated or at their wits' end, she calls the school. She talks to them about the situation so that somebody doesn't have to explain themselves over and over again. This tends to put everyone at ease. She's extremely helpful to anyone that calls. She follows through with a request. She writes down detailed notes and keeps me apprised of any new developments. She's friendly. She greets all, and many people have told me they appreciate the positive energy she has. And this year, positive energy is essential. Susan is really a team player and makes the SPED department a better place."
Next on the agenda is call to the public. And because our meetings are made available to a virtual audience, Paradise Valley Unified School District has implemented a process to collect virtual public comments. Members of the public wishing to submit these comments to the governing board for this meeting were able to do so by completing the public comment form located on the homepage of the district's website. In order to be included in tonight's meeting, members of the public were encouraged to complete the public comment form by noon today. It is important to note all comments related to board agenda items that were received by today's noon deadline were provided to all governing board members and the superintendent's office in advance of tonight's meeting. These comments will not be read aloud during the meeting. We would like to thank our community for voicing their thoughts and providing comments for tonight's meeting. We received a total of 1 comment submission. Members of the public present at this meeting wish to address the board on items not listed on the agenda, completed speaker cards to be recognized during call to the public. Due to Arizona open meeting law, the governing board cannot discuss or take any action on items not listed on the agenda. Because we have 4 cards, each speaker will have 3 minutes for their remarks. Members of the public who have asked to speak on agenda items will be recognized to do so at the appropriate time during the meeting. We appreciate your input, but please understand that board members may direct questions or comments to staff and other members of the board. Please state your first and last name prior to sharing your comment. The point of this and every board meeting is to accomplish the business at hand and to be able to do so openly and collaboratively. To that end, everyone attending the board meeting, whether speaking to the board or not, is expected to observe our meeting rules as well as rules of politeness, propriety, decorum, and good conduct. Pursuant to open meeting law, at the conclusion of call of the public, individual members of the board may respond to criticism made by those who have addressed the board, may ask staff to review a matter, may ask that a matter be placed on a future agenda, or may take no action. So, like I said, we have 4 cards. I'm just going to call on folks alphabetically. The first card is from Dr. Fred, and I know you pronounced it last time, and I apologized. Eitz.
I'm Dr. Fred Isles.
Thank you.
I come before you with an urgent warning of an imminent planetary genocidal death threat and a heavy heart. I speak for millions who cannot speak for themselves and who are about to die. Billions of people are unknowingly acquiescing to this tragedy, but not me. I do not consent. The mainstream media is making us afraid of COVID-19 and telling us that it's worse than cancer, but I know that it can be treated easily in 3 days using ivermectin or hydrochloroquine. The real bioweapon is the vaccine containing toxic graphene oxide, which the government, big pharma, and the media is hiding from you. They are trying to kill you, and they have an operation in full swing to fulfill the prophecy of the Georgia Guidestones to limit Earth's population to 500 million humans. It will be their families and friends living on this planet, not ours. The Biden administration is manufacturing a pandemic, an economic breakdown, a border crisis, an Afghanistan defeat, a financial crisis, a supply chain breakdown, an inflation crisis, tax increases, and a global genocide all at the same time. Don't think this is due to incompetence or senility. When things happen in politics, great planning and execution took place to pull it off. Quote, "For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It's a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned. No rumor is printed. No secret is revealed," unquote. Those were JFK's words in 1961 before he was assassinated, and we are in much greater peril today. The Arizona forensic audit of the 2020 election showed that Trump won by a landslide, but the Democrats stole our ballots from us, controlled the Dominion election machines through the internet, and celebrated a great victory. They told us that the pandemic came from China, when in fact, Big Pharma has been pumping toxic graphene oxide into our bodies for years with flu shots, vaccines, chemtrails, cotton swabs for PRC and antigen tests, and other vectors such as our food and water supply. 7,000 people have died, but it wasn't from a virus. It was from graphene oxide poisoning, which are in your mask, by the way, that you're wearing if you got them from China. And that's also in the little swabs that you get when you go for the PCR tests and the antigen tests, and it's also from chemtrails. Is that my limit? But if you want the rest of the story, I'd be happy to offer it to you. It's up to you.
Your time is up. Thank you, Dr. Isles.
Okay. I have a full report if anybody's interested in the rest of the story.
The next card is from Sandra Christensen.
Thank you, President Greenberg and board members. First off, I want to apologize for the last few times I've spoken. I have such a mother's heart, and I've been angry and upset because I see the decline in my son. So I know you guys are parents as well, and that you just want the best for the kids. But I just wanted to give an update on my son that you've heard me up here a few times, and I'm just really saddened that his mental health is declining now, and we're seeking out help for him. And a lot of other parents have reached out to me in the last few weeks because they're seeing similar things. My son is funny. My son is he's the type of person that lights up a room and he cheers people up. But this year, his little light has been extinguished because the initial quarantine that he had, and even though he had previously had COVID and he wasn't sick, he had no signs of COVID. They didn't accept his natural immunity, which we had a test done, even though they accept the Binax now, which can be swabbed and like you just swab it and take it. But the natural immunity, there's been studies out of Israel that shows that natural immunity has last years and years. And they did a study with, and they did another study in China that showed SARS-CoV-1, they still have immunity, so 17 years later. And so I'm just asking if the board can consider looking into natural immunity as well, not just vaccinated kids, to really take a look at this. Because if you want to follow the science, natural immunity is much better, it lasts longer. I know that there's other third vaccines that are coming people's way because it's waning their immunity. So I would just please ask the board if they could look into that. And I know I'm not a doctor, but I did go to veterinary school and we studied coronaviruses in school because they're prevalent, and it's prevalent in the environment. Dogs and horses and bats all get coronaviruses. Corona just means sun, and it's a little round thing. And so now that it's here, it's really hard to eradicate. Just like parvovirus in puppies, in order to eradicate it in a yard, you have to bleach every time a puppy, I work better because since I went to vet school, I'm better with animals. So I know my time is expiring, but I'm just asking you to look into the science and really consider natural immunity. Thank you.
Thank you. The next card is from David Hickson.
Like Ms. Christensen said, I too have gotten a little animated in the last couple times I've been here because I've been so angry. You stole from my 10-year-old her desire to want to play musical instruments with this ridiculous mask mandate. But really what I want to talk about, again, I want to emphasize what I asked before, is this vaccine mandate. You better not ever consider this. The FDA is trying to push through Pfizer. And if you're familiar with Project Veritas, you probably are, even though you won't admit it. Pfizer's come out with a whistleblower. Several folks now are coming out that this natural immunity is real. This vaccine is garbage. So do not impose any vaccine mandates. But I also want to ask tonight that you put on the agenda, and I think they need to be two distinctly different agenda items, because we have a pandemic, not only with this virus and this sensational disinformation campaign going on by the left, but this sex education and gender garbage that's being promulgated throughout the country, as well as this critical race theory. These two items, you should, and I'm requesting that you set up subcommittees and parents get involved in this, because I'm still deeply disturbed by what I've heard from prior meetings. In fact, she's here tonight, and I hope maybe she has more to say, but I'm extremely disturbed by what's being disseminated by our educators in our district here. So I would like to see that we have some kind of subcommittee formed and parents get involved, and we start to identify what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. I love talking about geography with my daughter, and dissolution of solids and that sort of thing, and spelling and reading and math. That's what I enjoy talking about with my daughter. But when it comes to sex, gender, and all those types of crazy things, that's my responsibility as a parent. It's not you and your teacher's responsibility to talk about genders and the 18 different sexes that apparently exist in this critical race theory garbage. You know, Martin Luther King said it best, judge one not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And this critical race garbage goes exactly opposite. It says judge someone by the color of their skin. So we have got to stop this. And that's, I think, one of your most critical mandates as board members. Critical race theory. Thank you.
Thank you. The last card we have is from Lisa Patchett.
Hi, I'm Lisa Patchett. I was here last meeting, and I apologize if I have to leave again early. It's my husband's 50th birthday, and I've got in-laws that looked at me very sour for leaving that party and coming here, but I needed to be here today. I went and looked through the Maricopa County Public Health Department website, pretty much in full. This is a part of it that I went through. It was consistently repetitive. There's different protocols. There's protocols for unmasked kids. There's protocols for masked kids. There's protocols for vaxxed kids, protocols for unvaxxed kids. Those seem to be the two lines. And every category, every subset, it's just repetitive over and over again. One of the things that I was looking at, if you guys remember me from last meeting, my son, who is in high school, got quarantined twice in one quarter, twice. He missed almost 20 days of school in one. He was out of school more than he was in school. They do a good job, and here's my little art for today. The beginning of contract tracing. This is my little artwork. Contract tracing, this is Johnny COVID who gets Johnny COVID. The kids with the mask get to stay. The kids that don't have a mask get quarantined right away. The thing is, there's no protocols in this whole thing that I looked up for Maricopa County that has an end for contract tracing. After 10 days, I want to know, did this kid get COVID? Did that kid get COVID? Who got COVID from Johnny COVID? There's nothing in this whole thing that I read. And it took me hours and days to go through every little subset of everything. There's nothing. So they need to finish the study, because that's just telling everybody who's got COVID and who doesn't have COVID doesn't cut it. So the CDC, I know everybody follows Maricopa County, but the CDC stopped charting breakthrough cases back in May. They become mixed in with the unvaxxed numbers, and it's a question for all of us to see what the CDC is doing. The CDC claims vaxxed and unvaxxed shed the virus equally, but for a shorter number of days. But they're similarly contagious. There's no, it has to do with the viral load. I don't have time to go into that, nor do I have time to go into data mining. My concern is when a student gets quarantined, it'll be for no less than 7 days, 10 being the most. I want to know what protocols are in place for students who will miss multiple days, like my son did. Is there a way to connect to the PV Connect, or are they on different timelines? I just want to know how the Shadow Mountain. The job requires added responsibility. The guy is there till 9 o'clock at night.
Okay, your time is up, Ms. Patchett. Thank you very much.
I think that money should be set aside for people doing the contract tracing.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is superintendent comments. Dr. Bales.
Thank you, President Greenberg. October has a lot of celebrations, and I'd like to highlight some of those at this time. It's National Principals Month, which honors principals for their significant impact on the success and well-being of our nation's students. At PV Schools, we are celebrating the contributions and leadership of all our principals and assistant principals. Thank you to our principals and assistant principals for their exceptional leadership. We appreciate all that you do. Next October is also Cybersecurity Month, and it is championed by the National Cybersecurity Alliance, of which PV Schools is an active member. The theme, quote, "Do your part, hashtag be cybersmart," end quote, helps to empower individuals and organizations to own their role in protecting their part of cyberspace. Thank you to our IT department, who are champions of cybersecurity, and their work with our data governance, which includes parents, cybersecurity task force, and cyber active departments. Thank you. Columbus Day is a U.S. holiday that commemorates the landing of Christopher Columbus in the Americas in 1492, and Columbus Day 2021 occurs on Monday, October 11th. It was unofficially celebrated in a number of cities and states as early as the 18th century, but did not become a federal holiday until 1937. Although it is a federal holiday, it's a school day for us, and many activities will occur across our district that day. The city of Phoenix recognizes October 11th as Indigenous People Day, which honors the cultures and histories of the Native American people. PV Schools honors the historical impact and contemporary culture of Indigenous peoples today and all year long with our Native American education program. The program provides culturally supportive initiatives such as community events and meetings and aims to increase academic achievement for our Native American students. And finally, the week of October 11th is National School Lunch Week. This school year, we're grateful that we can provide free breakfast and free lunch to all of our students. It's one less thing that parents need to worry about this year, and we're hoping more students take advantage of this opportunity. Furthermore, we are always looking for kitchen staff, so if you're interested in cooking for the best students in the state, please contact our Nutrition and Wellness Office and apply online. Thank you so much. That's all I have tonight, President Greenberg.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bales. Now we move to items for approval. First on the agenda is discussion, consideration, direction on voting for the one proposed ASBA bylaw change. We all received that. I think we all know what it is, but just in short, the board, actually the ASBA board, I believe it is submitted, was it the board that submitted it, Julie? I think it was the board, or either it was the board or the Hispanic Native American Indian Caucus is requesting a change. Actually, it was the caucus with the endorsement of the board. I apologize. Requesting a change that rather than just have a single individual from that caucus serve on the board, that be split in two so that there will be an individual representing the Hispanic caucus, an individual representing the Native American caucus, as well as the Black caucus during their term. This change will also allow for that one caucus to split to two if they so desire. So with that, may we have a motion? This is to, I guess, approve our support for this bylaw change.
So moved.
Does any member of the board have any comments or questions?
We need to. I need to provide direction to you, Mrs. Greenberg, that you're our delegate for ASBA for this.
I am, but don't we submit?
Is that?
I'm looking at Mrs. Bacon. In the past, we've had to submit our vote of approval.
I don't know. I think we need to look at the motion because I don't move the governing board, discuss, consider, and give direction on voting on one bylaw change proposal from the Arizona School Boards Association and vote to give direction to whomever we choose to vote in the manner the board has approved, and the voting is an online voting form.
Right. So we're actually giving direction to Mrs.
Dean.
Chisholm as the secretary.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So we we all are clear that that's what we are doing.
Shall I move that again? So moved.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh.
So we are voting on whether we are giving direction to Mrs. Cheeseman to vote to approve this or not approve. I think the motion should be to approve unless there's any direction to change that.
Did Mrs. Case have any questions or comments?
I think we also should approve it.
Okay, so the motion will be to provide direction to approve the bylaw amendment. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 No, any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is approval of the annual financial report for last fiscal year. Ms. Berrigan.
Thank you, President Greenberg and members of the board. Dr. Bales, I have a brief presentation as a summary of the 2020-2021 financial report for the school district, as well as the fiscal year 2019-20 Arizona Auditor General Classroom Spending Report. So we'll be talking about 2 separate years. Before I go into that, I did just want to share kind of a summary on a timeline so that it's either a refresher or just new information to make sure that you understand the understanding of the year's budget as well as the financial reporting process. In school districts, our fiscal year runs from July to June. So for example, I've put this fiscal year in so we have something to reference. Would begin July of 2021 and goes through June of 2022. And that's what we reference as fiscal year 2021-22. Beginning in January of 2021, our legislature and our state officials meet to determine what our budget will look like for the 2021-22 fiscal year, and that usually goes through April or May or June, or this year, June 30th. They went up to the very last moment for us. And that does provide a little bit of a tricky situation for school districts. If you recall, the budget was approved June 30th, and I think our board meeting was on June 4th, 5th, 6th, something like that. So it had just been approved in time for us to meet the required deadline for a budget proposal. And then generally, school boards will do the adoption of the budget in June and no later than July 15th of the school year. We don't have a July meeting, so we did that in the second June meeting of the school year. By the time October runs around, where we're at now, we have to complete the annual financial report before October 15th. And I've highlighted it in green for when I'm referencing the prior school year. So in this case, we're talking about fiscal year 2021. In December, or by December 15th of this year, we'll do our first budget revision for fiscal year 21-22. And then going back again to last fiscal year in February or March, our annual comprehensive financial report comes out. And that is the 170-ish page document that we share with our community, and bond rating agencies have a particular interest in that. And that is a much more comprehensive financial report. The AFR that we are presenting tonight does feed into that report. As well, in March of 2022, or in March of each year, we see the Arizona Auditor General School District Spending Report come out. I'll be presenting on 2 years ago's report this evening. And then by May 15th, we have to have our final budget revision completed for the year. So the revision number 2 for this fiscal year. So just wanted to make sure there was a common understanding of what our timeline looks like for budgets. Moving on to last year's financial report. Just wanted to share the purpose of the annual financial report, and that is to ensure that there is a reporting of all the district's expenditures and revenues for the year. The state does review that to ensure that no school district has gone over their adopted budget limit or their budget capacity. That's a big no-no. We would never do anything like that, but on occasion there have been school districts that do that. Then this, as I mentioned, is used to help us in the development of the comprehensive annual financial report, along with many other statistical tables and things of that nature that we include in there. And just as a note to the financial transparency that we always talk about, this is published on the Arizona Department of Education's website, and we put a link on our website pointing to that. So this information is available to the public. In a summary of our revenues and the sources of those revenues broken down by local, state, federal, and county, this is what that pie chart would look like. You can see that 62% of our revenue does come from local taxpayers, with the next largest portion at 27% from the state, followed by federal at 10%. That's a little bit larger portion of the pie than typical because we have ESSER dollars in there. So a little bit more money coming from federal government in these couple of years. And then 1% of that does come from county revenues. I do have the note there that of the local revenues, 28.8 million of that is for the M&O override that was passed by our local taxpayers. 6.4 million is the district additional assistance override passed by our local taxpayers. In this fiscal year, 78.8 million in bond revenues, again, passed by our wonderful local taxpayers. And then the majority of the remainder of that is the equalization-based formula. When the state has the formula that determines what each school district will receive in a given year, they then look at the property tax as a percentage of the total state property tax and determine what portion the district, the local district taxpayers will pay, and then they determine what the state will cover. And in our instance, about 75% of that is covered by the local taxpayer, with the remaining 25% being covered by the state. So we will look at expenditures now briefly and in a summary format. Maintenance and operation, we know, is our largest fund, and we spent about $231 million there. I will say on all of these slides, I continue to go back to the fact that this year was a unique, or last year was a unique year. 2021 was a very unique year. And it's going to be hard. We're all going to have to, when we look back on 2021, 2022, we're going to have to say, oh yeah, that was a COVID year. That's why the numbers are a little wonky and a little different than usual. Of these, there's not too much difference here. We did spend about $10 million more in maintenance and operation in 21 than we did in fiscal year 20. In the federal and state grants, we do have the ESG, the Enrollment Stabilization Grant from the state, is included in there. So that's going to be a larger number than typical, again, as well as some of those ESSER funds. So larger than typical number there. And just a reminder, that bond amount does include Sky Crossing in there. So that's also usually kind of an unusual year. And then moving on to expenditures, and this is broken down by what we refer to as the object in what is our chart of accounts, and that's sort of the summary of various funds. We break those down into these 5 categories: salary, and then employee benefits, purchase services, supplies, and then you do see a very small portion of the pie there as other. Between salaries and benefits in fiscal year 21, it was 86.1% of that pie. So these are for the major funds, which include M&O, Classroom Site Fund, the Instructional Improvement Fund, which we sometimes refer to as gaming money, indirect cost, and then the Medicaid reimbursement funds. So typically we spend somewhere around 85% on salaries and benefits, and this year we did spend a little bit more than typical at 86.1%. And that is common across all school districts. Salaries and benefits are always going to be our largest expense. So moving on to the fiscal year 20, so now we're not going back last year, but even the year before, with the Arizona Auditor General School District spending report, we do have some information we want to share with you here. And this is spending by operational area, the big pie chart that is always kind of referenced, especially down at the Capitol when the legislative session is occurring. I do present this with the caveat that the Auditor General's classroom spending report is a snapshot of just some pieces of data and information that they choose to provide. We don't get context with this, and I think that's why it's important for me and folks in my position to present this to the governing board so that we can provide that context to our local communities and they can understand why things may look different one year or the same from year to year. In this case, we see that 57.4% of our budget was spent on instruction, and that's the number that they usually sort of gravitate towards. What are we spending on instruction in the classroom, and how does that compare to our peers or the state? In recent years, they did recognize that if you see down below in the chart, I've broken it out by the classroom spending, which are those 3 pieces of the pie put together, the blue, the orange, and the gray. And then the non-classroom spending, which includes administration, plant operations, food service, and transportation. And the reason that the Office of the Auditor General sort of changed that reporting and included the student support and instructional support in together is because when they were finding when they were talking to a typical person who maybe isn't, a policymaker in school business, they understood that these things that are in student support and instructional support are really part of the instruction that the student is receiving. And I will share in a moment the details of what is included in those categories. But when you see all of those three put together, we're at about 73% for that year, which is very good. So just to share with you what the instructional expense is. Next slide. Just to share with you what the instructional expense is, the first piece is personnel, which includes teachers, paraprofessionals, and substitute teachers. It also includes our instructional supplies that are needed for our students, as well as instructional aids like textbooks and workbooks. And then if there's any field trips or athletics for activities, as well as any tuition paid to private schools when those are necessary, private institutions, I should say. When we get into non-instructional expenses, we start to talk about plant operations, and that's the maintenance of our school buildings and running our HVAC systems and custodial cleaning services and things of that nature. Student support, as we mentioned, talks about our counselors and our nurses, our speech and language pathologists, along with other therapists. And then instructional support includes things like our curriculum director and our special education director, our master teachers, and our librarians. So those are why that student support and instruction support category are really now sort of included in the total classroom expenditures. We also, of course, have our food service, so providing our meals and everything that entails to our students, and as well as transportation, getting our students to and from school, as well as athletic events and other extracurricular activities. Then we go into administration, and that one always sort of seems to be a place that people focus on, and I'll talk about it a little bit more in detail. The way administration is broken up in the state of Arizona includes more than I think what people typically think of administration. So that includes, yes, the superintendent and the assistant superintendents, but it also includes district staff like our payroll department and our human resources department and things that we need to function and operate sort of on the business side of what we would expect, in addition to all of the other things that we do. But it also includes our principals, our assistant principals, and our school secretaries, and I don't think that most people know that. So all of that is included in that administrative piece of that pie. Just as a comparison, and this is from the U.S. Census Bureau Annual Survey of School Financial Systems from 2019, which is the most recent data that they have out. Arizona spent on general administration an average of $555 per pupil. The U.S. average is $995 per pupil. So we are ranked 50th in administration spending, so the bottom. And even just in 2015, we were at 45, so we have decreased in rank since then. So administrative spending in the state of Arizona is not the highest point. And we are, in fact, at 55.8% of the U.S. average. Just to go into a little bit more detail on the classroom dollars for the instructional portion, which is the top portion of this chart, it reflects the amount that PV spends per pupil in instruction only, $5,258. What our peer average is, so we are above our peer average, as well as above the state average, and we are below the national average. We are below the national average because we are below the national average in revenue for per pupil revenue. So we can't spend what we don't have. Then with that classroom dollars, those three pieces of the pie combined together, so that's the instruction as well as the student and instructional support as they break them down. PVUSD is at nearly $6,700 per pupil. Our peer average is quite a bit below that, and then our state average is well below that. Again, national average we can't really compete with. And then with administrative costs, PVUSD at $813 per pupil, with the peer average being just a little bit less than PV at $773, and the state average being more at $936, and again, the national average being higher. And that's for fiscal year 1920. The Arizona Auditor General has a list of school districts. There's about 10 of us that they compare us to. That does include Tucson and Chandler and Gilbert. When I do my comparisons, I generally pull those three out. I think there are various reasons. First of all, Chandler and Gilbert are in a different part of the valley than we are. And they are both kind of hyper-growth districts. They've been growing, nonstop. We're in a slightly different situation here, so it's really hard to compare to them. Tucson isn't even in the same county as us, and they also are under very different circumstances. They get additional funding called desegregation that we don't get, so it's hard to compare to that as well. But in the group that we do compare to, that does also include Deer Valley, Peoria, Dysart, Mesa, and Phoenix Union. So I have included here the instructional spending. So that's just the first largest portion of the pie. And while we have decreased there by 1.2% from fiscal year 19 to fiscal year 20, I will reiterate that fiscal year 20 in particular was sort of our first full year of COVID, and that things were a little unique in that year. So it's hard to do a comparison as a one-on-one. There are various reasons for this. And you'll see that other districts also saw a decrease in their instructional spending, including Mesa and then Phoenix Union at a pretty significant decrease of 2.2%. And even the districts that did increase their instructional spending didn't do so by a large amount. When we pull those three pieces of the pie together to get the classroom spending district comparison with the comparison districts that I say we really do compare to, you can see that we're at the top of that list. And it's in alphabetical order, but the only other one that's right there with us is Peoria Unified, both of us being at 72.9%. So I do think that that is something we can be proud of, and I'm certainly proud to share that information with you this evening. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bergen. Does anybody have any? Actually, let's go for a motion first, and then if anybody has questions or comments.
So moved.
Okay, so this is to approve this report as submitted. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Mrs. Case?
Thank you. You went back to one of your first slides. There was the money that we receive from federal funds. Could you go over the percentage and what they were in the past before all the ESSER funds and COVID and all those kinds of things? What was the difference of that? What percentage?
I would have to look that up and get back to you on that. I don't know that off the top of my head. It's definitely less. I don't know what the percentage of revenues look like as a piece of pie, but I can absolutely get that information and share that with you.
And then what is it now? What was on your chart again?
10%. So this year, or last year, excuse me, a little over $33 million, which was 10% of the total revenues.
The total revenues. My point of that is federally, we have many, many mandates from the federal, but not that much of our funding comes from the federal, was my point.
Yes, we do. Both of those statements are true.
So my point is there's a lot of demands put on to us in various areas of education that come from the federal level, and yet only 10% of our funds. And I think it was less that was my point. It's even less normally.
Yes, that is correct. It is less normally.
Ms. Bergen, would those in fiscal 20 included ESSER 1 or ESSER 2 dollars?
Those would have included ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 dollars, not all of ESSER 2 dollars. It would have had all of ESSER 1 is there, only portions of ESSER 2.
And so between the two of those, that was roughly $22 million, if I remember right, between those two funds. And so not quite all of that. So it's a substantial amount of money.
That's correct.
In that budget that year because of it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Case, did you have any other questions?
No, I do not.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion on the floor to approve the report. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Last on our agenda for approval is acceptance of gifts and donations. We are grateful to all of our donors. I'd like to note a couple here. The NFL Foundation gave North Canyon High School $2,500 for athletics. And at Paradise Valley High School, Andrew Allen donated $1,000 to the band program. So again, if any of our donors are here, thank you. And if you are listening at home, thank you. And may we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. That is all of our items on the agenda. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you.